I still remember standing on that sidewalk in LA, staring across the street like I'd just stepped into some weird alternate universe. It was opening night for a brand new fusion restaurant, lights blazing, music blasting, people lining up to take selfies under the neon sign. And the wild part, everything about that place was mine. The decor, the layout, the exact shade of teal I spent 3 weeks obsessing over. Even the menu font was identical. And then, just to twist the knife a little deeper, I saw him. My manager, the guy I'd trained for 7 years, smiling like he invented the whole thing, shaking hands with customers I recognized, my regular. While two of my former servers stood behind him, wearing aprons I swear he copied stitch for stitch. In that moment, I felt this weird mix of numbness and panic, like my brain couldn't decide whether to shut down or explode. I remember thinking, there's no way this is happening. There's no way he actually did this, but he did. And watching people walk into his doorway instead of mine felt like watching someone carry pieces of my life out of a burning house. So yeah. If you've ever wondered what it feels like to build something from scratch, only to watch someone you trusted steal it right in front of you, let me tell you how my restaurant manager built a replica of my brand right across the street. Anyway, let me back up for a second. My name's Daniel, I'm 45 now, and for most of my adult life, my world revolved around my fusion restaurant in Los Angeles. I started it in my mid-30s after leaving a corporate job that was draining the soul out of me. I put everything into that place, my savings, my time, my sanity, and for a while, it paid off. The restaurant was packed most nights. People posted TikToks about our dishes. We got a couple local awards. It felt like my shot at finally doing something meaningful. And somewhere along the way, this kid, well, not a kid, but 10 years younger than me, came my right hand. He started as a server, worked his way up, and eventually took over operations. When things got too hectic for me to juggle alone, I trusted him more than I trusted most people in my life. Gave him keys, passwords, vendor contacts, everything. Back then I thought handing him more responsibility would make my life easier. I had no idea it would cost me nearly everything. If you'd met me 12 years ago, you'd never guess I'd end up running a restaurant, let alone letting someone get close enough to wreck it. Back then I was just another burnt-out corporate guy in a button-down shirt, sitting in traffic on the 405, wondering why every day felt like I was living someone else's life. I had money, yeah, but zero joy. My doctor literally told me my stress levels were impressively bad, which I didn't even know was a thing. So I quit. People thought I was insane, me parents definitely did, but I'd always loved cooking. Not the fancy Michelin star or die kind, just the kind where you use whatever's around, and somehow it tastes like home. I grew up in a mixed household, Korean mum, Mexican dads. So fusion wasn't a trend for me, it was just dinner. I figured, if I'm going to stress myself to death, might as well do it over kimchi birria tacos instead of spreadsheets. Opening the restaurant was chaos, expensive chaos. I took out a loan, maxed out a credit card, and spent nights on a busted air mattress in the back room because I couldn't afford to go home. My first month, I cried twice, once because a food critic roasted us, and once because a stranger said our short rib noodles were the best thing they'd eaten all week. Those tiny wins kept me going. Somewhere around month 4, this guy walks in asking if we're hiring servers. His name was Eric, mid-20s, bombs, charismatic in that I'll figure it out kind of way. He didn't have a ton of experience, but he had this energy that made people comfortable. It took him less than 2 shifts to become the favourite among regulars. Customers remembered his name before they remembered mine. And honestly, I loved that. When you're drowning, you cling to anyone who looks like they're swimming. Eric became my go-to person. If something broke, he fixed it. If someone quit, he covered their shift. When I was too tired to think straight, he'd look at me and say, "Go home, I got this." It sounds cheesy, but I felt like I finally had a teammate. And when you run a restaurant, finding people who actually care is like finding a unicorn. The bond really formed during this one nightmare Friday night. The fryer died right before the dinner rush. 2 cooks called out, and a table of 12 walked in without a reservation. I was seconds away from flipping the closed sign and calling it quits. But Eric jumped on the line. I grabbed a serving tray and we tag-teamed the whole thing. By the end of the night, sweaty and exhausted, we high-fived like we'd just survived a war. That was the night I decided, okay, this guy is different. He's in this with me. As the restaurant grew, so did his role. I made him shift lead, then assistant manager, eventually manager. Not because he demanded it, but because he earned it. He showed up early, left late, and genuinely seemed proud of what we built. I'd catch him walking around the dining room, smiling like he owned the place. And it honestly made me happy. Who doesn't want someone to love your dream as much as you do? Money started getting better after our first viral pasta TikTok food tour included us in their top 10 fusion spots. Overnight, we went from, are we going to make rent, to, we need a bigger fridge. We hired more staff, got liquor license, upgraded equipment. I was finally breathing, and with growth came trust, maybe too much trust. I started leaning on Eric in ways I didn't realize were risky. He handled inventory, payroll, vendor calls. I gave him access to the recipe book, something only I had touched for years. At first it felt practical. I couldn't be everywhere, and he was the only one who truly knew the operation inside out. When investors called or reporters emailed, he was often the one responding, because I was in the kitchen or at meetings. He became the unofficial face of the restaurant. There were tiny red flags, but I brushed them off. Like the time he asked for digital copies of all recipes to make things more efficient, or when he said vendors should contact him directly to avoid miscommunication, or when I caught him scribbling notes in a separate notebook he never left on site. Anytime something felt slightly off, I'd convince myself I was paranoid. After all, this guy had been with me through everything. Looking back, I can see every warning sign like it's highlighted in neon. But at the time, I was tired, I was grateful, and honestly, I wanted to believe people were as loyal as I was. Things really shifted the night he and I sat in the office after close. He mentioned, super casually, that he'd been thinking a lot about his future, how he wanted more responsibility, more ownership, a bigger stake. I remember nodding and saying, yeah, of course, we'll figure something out. If I had actually understood what he meant, if I'd realized what more looked like to him, none of this would have happened. The months leading up to everything falling apart felt weird, not dramatic, not obviously suspicious, just off. The kind of off you only understand in hindsight, when you're replaying every moment like a detective who's suddenly watching the director's cut with commentary. It started when my dad got sick. Nothing life-threatening, but serious enough that I needed to fly up to Seattle every other week. The restaurant could run without me for a day or two, but not smoothly, not without someone stepping up. And of course, that someone was Eric. He practically shoved me into the Uber, saying, dude, go be with your family. I got this. At the time, I appreciated him more than ever. But that was also, when he started taking over things, I used to handle myself quietly, smoothly, without asking. Suddenly, he was the one emailing vendors. He was the one responding to investor inquiries. He was the one collecting customer feedback and streamlining operations. Every time I checked in, he'd give me these extremely polished updates, like a mini PowerPoint but in spoken form. Revenue steady, vendor rates locked in, staff morale is high. The whole thing felt rehearsed in a way that should have flagged something, but I had too much on my plate to dig deeper. One day he asked, hey, do you mind if I take over interviewing new hires? You're barely here and it slows us down. I remember feeling a bit defensive. This was still my restaurant, but he wasn't wrong, so I said yes. That yes opened the door for 100 more. The turning point. The biggest shift happened when he suggested digitizing everything. He framed it like a genius idea. Dude, our recipes are all over the place. Some handwritten, some in the PDF you made in 2017, some in the old binder. If something happened to that binder, we'd be screwed. Let me compile everything into a master file. It was logical, Responsible, smart, and unbelievably stupid of me to agree to. I emailed him the recipes, hundreds of them. Dishes I spent years tweaking, stuff inspired by my family, old memories, trial and error disasters that turned into signature items. I sent him all of it. He also requested cost sheets to create more accurate projections. Again, sounded reasonable, so I sent those too. At this point, he had everything he needed to replicate the entire operation, and I didn't realize it for a second. Red flags I ignored. There were moments, tiny glimpses, where something felt wrong. A supplier accidentally mentioned a big new project Eric was excited about. A line cook asked me if I was cool with the expansion idea, which made no sense to me at the time. Eric took phone calls outside, whispering, pacing. A wine rep said, "Can't wait to work with you guys at the new spot too," and Eric cut him off so fast it was almost funny. Every time I asked, Eric had an explanation ready. Miscommunication. They're mixing us up with another restaurant. Dude, you're stressed. Don't overthink things. The gaslighting was subtle, gentle, almost caring. I had no reason not to believe him. The discovery. The truth hit me on a random Tuesday afternoon, completely out of nowhere. I was helping prep in the kitchen when one of our bartenders walked in and casually said, "So, are we supposed to start training across the street next month?" I froze. "What are you talking about?" He blinked. "You know, the new spot. The one Eric's opening. He said some of us might rotate shifts." My stomach dropped so fast I felt nauseous. "What new spot?" The bartender's eyes widened. "You don't know?" I didn't say anything else. I just wiped my hands, grabbed my keys, and walked outside. My heart was hammering. I felt hot and cold all at once. 2 blocks away, barely out of sight of my restaurant, was a building with blacked out windows, construction signs, and a giant permit taped to the glass. And written right there on the paperwork was the name of a restaurant. Not the same name as mine, but close enough to feel like a slap in the face. And the logo? It was practically my logo's cousin. Same style, same colours, same vibe. But the real punch came when I found the menu taped to the window. I didn't even need to read it. I recognised everything. The dish names, the plating descriptions, the fusions that came from my brain. He didn't just want to open a restaurant. He wanted to open my restaurant. The confrontation, I didn't plan. I marched straight back to my place, found him in the office, and shut the door behind me. "What the hell are you doing?" I said. My voice was so shaky, I barely recognised it. He didn't even look guilty, just annoyed, like I was interrupting something. "Dan, calm down, I was going to tell you." "When?" "After the grand opening." He sighed. "Look, I've given 7 years of my life to this place. I can't grow here. I need something that's mine." "That's not something," I snapped. "That's my entire business, copied and pasted into a building across the street." "It's not copying," he said, leaning back like he was the victim. "It's inspired. And honestly, you've been holding me back, holding him back." That line still makes my blood boil. I told him he was fired. He shrugged and said, "Already left, man. My contract ended last week." I didn't even know he had a contract that could end. He walked past me without another word. That was the last time we ever spoke face to face. The devastating shift. Within 2 weeks, 5 employees left to join him. Vendors started giving him priority. Customers got confused by the 2 similar brands online. Our revenue dropped nearly 40%. In 1 week, I went from being a proud restaurant owner to feeling like an intruder in my own story. And the worst part? His place wasn't even open yet. The real damage was only beginning. The days after the confrontation were honestly some of the darkest of my life. I'd walk into my restaurant every morning and just feel this weight sitting on my chest, like the air had gotten heavier, tables were emptier, staff energy was weird. Some customers even asked, "Hey, are you opening a second location across the street?" I had to smile through it. "No, that's not me." And every time I said it, it hurt more. I barely slept. My mind kept replaying everything, every sign I missed, every trust me, every moment I handed him more control. I'd lie awake thinking, did I really let this happen? Did I actually help build the thing that's going to destroy me? My friends told me to rest, but rest felt impossible. My brain was a hamster wheel of panic and shame, so much shame. It's one thing to lose money, it's another to lose money and feel stupid for not seeing it coming. My parents tried to be supportive. My mum would send me long texts at 6 a.m. like, "You're strong, you'll rebuild." And my dad, who never texts, sent a single, "We love you," which somehow broke me more than anything. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted my restaurant back. I wanted my trust back. Neither felt realistic. The opening night punch in the gut. When his place finally opened, I felt sick. I stood across the street, half hidden behind a tree, like a divorced guy watching his ex marry someone else. The neon sign lit up, a line formed. People took photos. Influencers filmed TikToks. My heart just sank. From inside my own restaurant, I could hear his music. I could smell his food. It was surreal. That night, only 8 tables were filled on our side. 8. A month earlier, we were turning people away at the door. I remember wiping down an already clean counter just to keep my hands busy. One of my cooks muttered, "Feels like we're watching our own funeral." He wasn't wrong. Trying to fight back. Eventually, the fear turned into anger that pushed me into action. I scheduled a meeting with a lawyer who specialized in intellectual property. I walked in with a folder of comparison photos, menus, design sketches, everything. The lawyer flipped through the pages like he'd seen this a million times, and he had. Recipes, he said, are almost impossible to protect. I felt a punch in my gut. "How about the brand identity?" I asked. He shrugged. "You might have something with trade dress, depending on how much he copied the look and feel." Trade dress. The visual appearance that signifies your brand. Decor, menu style, layout, colour scheme. So basically the parts he copied. We filed a claim. I gathered screenshots, old emails, timestamps, anything that could prove he didn't just get inspiration. He got everything because I gave it to him. And that realization was its own special kind of pain. The legal process was slow, torturously slow. Some days it felt like we'd win. Other days I wanted to give up because the whole thing felt like pushing a boulder uphill with a toothpick. Meanwhile, business kept slipping. We weren't dying, but we were definitely bleeding. I had to reduce hours, cut back on orders, cancel a renovation I'd been planning for months. But here's the thing. Fighting back even imperfectly gave me a tiny bit of power again. It reminded me I wasn't completely helpless. The outcome. After months of back and forth, Eric and his investors agreed to a settlement. A small one. Smaller than I hoped, but bigger than zero. They also had to change parts of their branding and redesign the interior slightly. Not enough to shut them down, but enough to legally acknowledge they crossed a line. People always ask, "Did that make you feel better?" Honestly, not really. The money covered some legal bills and overdue vendor payments, but it didn't fix the betrayal. It didn't rebuild trust. It didn't magically bring my old customers back. But it did something else. It clarified the truth. He didn't succeed because he was smarter. He succeeded because I trusted him blindly, and I would never make that mistake again. Rebuilding myself and the restaurant, after the settlement, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let him define my future. If my restaurant was going to survive, it needed to evolve, not compete with a clone of its old self. So I rebranded slightly. New logo, new signature dishes, new plating style. I even repainted the walls and swapped out some decor. It wasn't about erasing the past. It was about making the place unmistakably me again. Slowly, customers started coming back. Not because we were the hyped new spot, but because the food was still good and the experience felt authentic. Some said they tried his place and came back to mine because it felt colder or like it was missing something. Yeah, it was missing me. I train my staff differently now. More transparency, more boundaries. No one gets unilateral access to everything. Passwords are segmented, vendor accounts have verification, every document goes through an actual lawyer, even if it's just a vendor agreement about napkins. Trust isn't dead for me. It's just no longer handed out like candy. Message to the, to the viewer, if you're listening to this and you're building a business, especially a small one. Well, here's the hard truth. The biggest threats aren't always competitors. Sometimes they're the people you trust the most. A few lessons I learned the hardest way possible. Don't confuse loyalty with dependency. Just because someone stayed with you through the grind doesn't mean they won't leave the second they see a shortcut. Put everything in writing, even with family. Contracts aren't signs of mistrust. They're protection for both people. Never give one person full access to all your operational DNA. Split responsibilities. Create checks, even if it feels inconvenient. Listen to the tiny red flags. They're rarely tiny. You're not paranoid. You're protecting your life's work. Closing line. Looking back now, when I stand outside my restaurant and see his neon sign across the street, I don't feel anger anymore. I feel clarity, because my restaurant manager built a replica of my brand right across the street isn't just a story about betrayal. It's the reminder that I'll never let someone walk off with my dream again.